Hello, fellow flamenco enthusiasts, and welcome to Everything Flamenco. I'm your host, La Hugo, and this is episode 41, where we're going to continue with the story of Carmen, as written by Prosper Merimay. And today we will read chapter 3, part 3. To shorten the story, sir, Carmen procured me civilian clothes, disguised in which I got out of Seville without being recognized. I went to Jerez with a letter from Pastia to a dealer in Anicet, whose house was the smugglers' meeting place. I was introduced to them, and their leader, surnamed El Danker, enrolled me in his gang. We started for Gassin, where I found Carmen, who had told me she would meet me there. In all these expeditions, she acted as spy for our gang, and she was the best that ever was seen. She had now just returned from Gibraltar and had already arranged with the captain of a ship for a cargo of English goods, which we were to receive on the coast. We went to meet it near Estepona. We hid part in the mountains, and laden with the rest, we proceeded to Ronda. Carmen had gone there before us. It was she again who warned us when we had better enter the town. This first journey and several subsequent ones turned out well. I found the smuggler's life pleasanter than a soldier's. I could give presents to Carmen, I had money, I had a mistress. I felt little or no remorse, for as the gypsies say, the happy man never longs to scratch his itch. We were made welcome everywhere. My comrades treated me well and even showed me a certain respect. The reason of this was that I had killed my man, and that some of them had no exploit of that description on their conscience. But what I valued most in my new life was that I often saw Carmen. She showed me more affection than ever. Nevertheless, she would never admit before my comrades that she was my mistress. And she had even made me swear all sorts of oaths that I would not say anything about her to them. I was so weak in that creature's hands that I obeyed all her whims. And besides, this was the first time she had revealed herself as possessing any of the reserve of a well-conducted woman, and I was simple enough to believe she had really cast off her former habits. Our gang, which consisted of 8 or 10 men, was hardly ever together except at decisive moments, and we were usually scattered by 2s and 3s about the towns and villages. Each one of us pretended to have some trade. One was a tinker, another was a groom. I was supposed to peddle haberdashery, but I hardly ever showed myself in large places on account of my unlucky business at Seville. One day, or rather one night, we were to meet below Veja. Aldanker and I got there before the others. "We shall soon have a new comrade," said he. "Carmen has just managed one of her best tricks. She has contrived the escape of her rom, who was in the presidio at Tarifa." I was already beginning to understand the gypsy language, which nearly all my comrades spoke, and this word rom startled me. "What? Her husband? Is she married then?" said I to the captain. "Yes," he replied, "married to Garcia el Tuerto, as cunning a gypsy as she is herself. The poor fellow has been at the galleys. Carmen has wheedled the surgeon of the presidio to such good purpose that she'd managed to get her rom out of prison. Faith, that girl's worth her weight in gold. For 2 years she has been trying to contrive his escape, but she could do nothing until the authorities took it into their heads to change the surgeon. She soon managed to come to an understanding with this new one. You may imagine how pleasant this news was for me. I soon saw Garcia el Tuerto. He was the very ugliest brute that was ever nursed in gypsydom. His skin was black, his soul was blacker, and he was altogether the most thorough-paced ruffian I ever came across in my life. Carmen arrived with him, and when she called him her rom in my presence, you should have seen the eyes she made at me. and the faces she pulled whenever Garcia turned his head away. I was disgusted and never spoke a word to her all night. The next morning we had made up our packs, and I had already started when we became aware that we had a dozen horsemen on our heels. The braggart Andalusians, who had been boasting they would murder everyone who came near them, cut a pitiful figure at once. There was a general rout. Aldanquer, Garcia, a good-looking fellow from Ecija, who was called El Remendado, and Carmen herself kept their wits about them. The rest forsook the mules and took to the gorges, where the horses could not follow them. There was no hope of saving the mules, so we hastily unstrapped the best part of our booty and, taking it onto our shoulders, we tried to escape through the rocks down the steepest of the slopes. We threw our packs down in front of us and followed them as best we could, slipping along on our heels. Meanwhile, the enemy fired at us. It was the first time I'd ever heard bullets whistling around me, and I didn't mind it very much. When there's a woman looking up, there is no particular merit in snapping one's fingers at death. We all escaped, except the poor remendado, who received a bullet wound in the loins. I threw away my pack and tried to lift him up. "Idiot!" shouted Garcia. "What do you want with offal? Finish him off and don't lose the cotton stockings." "Drop him!" cried Carmen. I was so exhausted that I was obliged to lay him down for a moment under a rock. Garcia came up and fired his blunderbuss full into his face. "He'd be a clever fellow who recognized him now," said he, as he looked at the face, cut to pieces by a dozen slugs. "There, sir, that's the delightful sort of life I've led." That night, we found ourselves in a thicket, worn out with fatigue, with nothing to eat, and ruined by the loss of our mules. What do you think that devil Garcia did? He pulled a pack of cards out of his pocket and began playing games with Aldanquer by the light of a fire they kindled. Meanwhile, I was lying down, staring at the stars, thinking of El Remendado, and telling myself I would just as lief be in his place. Carmen was squatting down near me, and every now and then she would rattle her castanets and hum a tune. Then, drawing close to me, as if she would have whispered in my ear, she kissed me 2 or 3 times over almost against my will. "You are a devil," said I to her. "Yes," she replied. After a few hours' rest, she departed to Gaza, and the next morning a little goat herd brought us some food. We stayed there all that day, and in the evening we moved close to Gaza. We were expecting news from Carmen, but none came. After daylight broke, we saw a muleteer attending a well-dressed woman with a parasol, and a little girl who seemed to be her servant. Said Garcia, "There go 2 mules and 2 women whom St. Nicholas has sent us. I would rather have had 4 mules, but no matter, I'll do the best I can with these." He took his blunderbuss and went down the pathway, hiding himself among the brushwood. We followed him, Aldanquer and I keeping a little way behind. As soon as the woman saw us, instead of being frightened, and our dress would have been enough to frighten anyone, she burst into a fit of loud laughter. "Ah, the Lilipendi! They take me for a Rerani!" It was Carmen, but so well disguised that if she had spoken any other language, I should never have recognized her. She sprang off her mule and talked some time in an undertone with Aldenquer and Garcia. Then she said to me, "Canary bird, we shall meet again before you're hanged. I'm off to Gibraltar on gypsy business. You'll soon have news of me." We parted after she had told us of a place where we should find shelter for some days. That girl was the providence of our gang. We soon received some money sent by her, and a piece of news which was still more useful to us, to the effect that on a certain day 2 English lords would travel from Gibraltar to Granada by a road she mentioned. This was a word to the wise. They had plenty of good guineas. Garcia would have killed them, but Aldanquer and I objected. All we took from them, besides their shirts, which we greatly needed, was their money and their watches. Sir, a man may turn rogue in sheer thoughtlessness. You lose your head over a pretty girl. You fight another man about her. There is catastrophe. You have to take to the mountains, and you turn from a smuggler into a robber before you have time to think about it. After this matter of the English lords, we concluded that the neighborhood of Gibraltar would not be healthy for us, and we plunged into the Sierra de Ronda. You once mentioned José Maria to me. Well, it was there I made acquaintance with him. He always took his mistress with him on his expeditions. She was a pretty girl, quiet, modest, well-mannered. You never heard a vulgar word from her, and she was quite devoted to him. He, on his side, led a very unhappy life. He was always running after other women. He ill-treated her, and then sometimes he would take it into his head to be jealous. One day, he slashed her with a knife. Well, she only doted on him the more. That's the way with women, and especially with Andalusians. This girl was proud of the scar on her arm, and would display it as though it were the most beautiful thing in the world. And then José Maria was the worst of comrades in the bargain. In one expedition we made with him, he managed so that he kept all the profits, and we had all the trouble and the blows. But I must go back to my story. We had no sign at all from Carmen. Aldanquer said, "One of us will have to go to Gibraltar to get news of her. She must have planned some business. I'd go at once, only I'm too well known at Gibraltar." El Tuerto said, "I'm well known there too. I've played so many tricks on the crayfish, and as I've only one eye, it is not over easy for me to disguise myself." "Then I suppose I must go," said I, delighted at the very idea of seeing Carmen again. "Well, how am I to set about it?" The others answered, "You must either go by sea, or you must get through by San Rocco, whichever you like the best. Once you are in Gibraltar, inquire in the port where a chocolate seller called La Roriona lives. When you found her, she'll tell you everything that's happening." It was settled that we were all to start for the Sierra, that I was to leave my two companions there and take my way to Gibraltar, in the character of a fruit seller. At Ronda, one of our men procured me a passport. At Cassin, I was provided with a donkey. I loaded it with oranges and melons and started forth. When I reached Gibraltar, I found that many people knew La Royona, but that she was either dead or had gone at finibus terru, and to my mind, her disappearance explained the failure of our correspondence with Carmen. I stabled my donkey and began to move about the town, carrying my oranges as though to sell them, but in reality looking to see whether I could not come across any face I knew. The place is full of ragamuffins from every country in the world, and it really is like the Tower of Babel, for you can't go 10 paces along a street without hearing as many languages. I did see some gypsies, but I hardly dared confide in them. I was taking stock of them, and they were taking stock of me. We had mutually guessed each other to be rogues, but the important thing for us was to know whether we belonged to the same gang. After having spent 2 days in fruitless wanderings, and having found out nothing either as to La Royona or as to Carmen, I was thinking I would go back to my comrades as soon as I had made a few purchases, when, towards sunset, as I was walking along a street, I heard a woman's voice from a window say, "Orange seller?" I looked up, and on a balcony I saw Carmen looking out, beside a scarlet-coated officer with gold epaulettes, curly hair, and all the appearance of a rich milord. As for her, she was magnificently dressed. A shawl hung on her shoulders, she had a gold comb in her hair, everything she wore was of silk, and the cunning little wretch, not a bit altered, was laughing till she held her sides. The Englishman shouted to me in mangled Spanish to come upstairs, as the lady wanted some oranges, and Carmen said to me in Basque, "Come up, and don't look astonished at anything." Indeed, nothing that she did ought ever to have astonished me. I don't know whether I was most happy or wretched at seeing her again. At the door of the house, there was a tall English servant with a powdered head, who ushered me into a splendid drawing-room. Instantly Carmen said to me in Basque, "You don't know one word of Spanish, and you don't know me." Then, turning to the Englishman, she added, "I told you so. I saw at once he was Basque. Now you'll hear what a queer language he speaks. Doesn't he look silly? He's like a cat that's been caught in the larder." "And you," said I to her in my own language. You look like an impudent jade, and I've a good mind to scar your face here and now before your spark. My spark, said she. Why, you've guessed that all alone. Are you jealous of this idiot? You're even sillier than you were before our evening in the Calle de Canilejo. Don't you see, fool, that at this moment I'm doing gypsy business, and doing it in the most brilliant manner? This house belongs to me. The guineas of that crayfish will belong to me. I lead him by the nose, and I'll lead him to a place that he'll never get out of. And if I catch you doing any gypsy business in this style again, I'll see to it that you never do any again, said I. Ah, upon my word, are you my rom? Pray that you give me orders. If El Tuerto is pleased, what have you to do with it? Wouldn't you be very happy that you are the only man who can call himself my minchorro? What does he say? Inquired the Englishman. He says he's thirsty and would like a drink, answered Carmen, and she threw herself back upon a sofa, screaming with laughter at her own translation. When that girl begins to laugh, sir, it was hopeless for anybody to try and talk sense. Everybody laughed with her. The big Englishman began to laugh too, like the idiot he was, and ordered the servant to bring me something to drink. While I was drinking, she said to me, Do you see that ring he has on his finger? If you like, I'll give it to you. And I answered, I would give one of my fingers to have your milord out of the mountains, and each of us with a maquila in his fist. Maquila, what does that mean? Asked the Englishman. Maquila, said Carmen, still laughing, means an orange. Isn't it a queer word for an orange? He says he'd like you to eat a maquila. Does he? Said the Englishman. Very well. Bring one more maquila tomorrow. While we were talking, a servant came in and said dinner was ready. Then the Englishman stood up, gave me a piastre, and offered his arm to Carmen, as if she couldn't have walked alone. Carmen, who was still laughing, said to me, My boy, I can't ask you to dinner, but tomorrow, as soon as you hear the drums beat for parade, come here with your oranges. You'll find a better furnished room than the one in the Calle de Candilejo, and you'll see whether I am still your Carmencita. Then afterwards, we'll talk about gypsy business. I gave her no answer. Even when I was in the street, I could hear the Englishman shouting, Bring more maquila tomorrow, and Carmen's peals of laughter. I went out, not knowing what I should do. I hardly slept, and next morning I was so enraged with the treacherous creature that I made up my mind to leave Gibraltar without seeing her again. But the moment the drums began to roll, my courage failed me. I took up my net full of oranges and hurried off to Carmen's house. Her window shutters had been pulled apart a little, and I saw her great dark eyes watching me. The powdered servant showed me in at once. Carmen set him out with a message, and as soon as we were alone, she burst into one of her fits of crocodile laughter and threw her arms around my neck. Never had I seen her look so beautiful. She was dressed out like a queen and scented. She had silken furniture, embroidered curtains, and I togged out like the thief I was. Minchorro, said Carmen, I've got a good mind to smash up everything here, set fire to the house, and take myself off to the mountains. And then she would fondle me, and then she would laugh, and she danced about and tore up her fripperies. Never did monkey gambol, nor make such faces, nor play such wild tricks as she did that day. When she had recovered her gravity, Hark, she said, this is gypsy business. I'm meaning to take me to Ronda, where I have a sister who is a nun. Here she shrieked with laughter again. We shall pass by a particular spot which I shall make known to you. Then you must fall upon him and strip him to the skin. Your best plan would be to do for him, but, she added, with a certain fiendish smile of hers, which no one who saw it ever had any desire to imitate. Do you know what you had better do? Let El Tuerto come up in front of you. You keep a little behind. The crayfish is brave and skillful too, and he has good pistols. Do you understand? and she broke off with another fit of laughter that made me shiver. "No," said I. "I hate Garcia, but he's my comrade. Someday, maybe, I'll rid you of him, but we'll settle our account after the fashion of my country. It's only chance that has made me a gypsy, and in certain things I shall always be a thorough Navarrese, as the proverb says." "You're a fool," she rejoined, "a simpleton, a regular payo. You're just like the dwarf who thinks himself tall because he can spit a long way. You don't love me. Be off with you." Oh, whenever she said to me, "Be off with you," I couldn't go away. I promised I would start back to my comrades and wait the arrival of the Englishman. She, on her side, promised she would be ill until she left Gibraltar for Ronda. So that was part 3 of chapter 3. I hope you enjoyed that one. I could already see the differences between this part and the opera by Georges Bizet. Quite interesting. Um, I would have loved to compare the two still, but I don't want to stretch out the Carmen episodes for too long. So I will see you next week for the last part of chapter 3, and let's see what happens. Ole!